At 69, Lady Sarah McCorquodale has finally spoken. But this time, the revelations aren't about Diana's heartbreak. They're about Prince Charles himself. The man who would be king, the man who once stood beside Diana at the altar, the man who shaped her fate in ways the world never fully understood. For decades, Sarah remained silent, watching as history unfolded, watching as the truth was buried beneath the weight of royal tradition. But now, she's ready to reveal what truly happened behind the palace doors, the whispers, the betrayals, and the secrets that Charles never wanted the world to know. Was Diana ever meant to be his queen, or was she simply a placeholder, a carefully orchestrated pawn in a game much larger than herself? Sarah's confession suggests the latter. Charles never intended to love Diana. From the very beginning, there were whispers of plans quietly being made, conversations held in hushed tones, and a future being mapped out that never included Diana as a permanent fixture. The world watched a fairy tale unfold, but Sarah saw something far more calculated, something that sent chills down her spine. Diana was a necessity, not a choice. She was young, she was beautiful, and she was adored by the public. Everything a future king's wife should be. But she was never Camilla. Sarah had seen the warning signs, the subtle dismissals, and the carefully controlled distance Charles kept even before the wedding. Diana, desperate for his affection, had confided in her sister, hoping for reassurance. But Sarah knew the truth. Charles had already made his choice long before he ever proposed to Diana. And that truth was devastating. He was bound by duty, not love. The engagement was a spectacle, the wedding a grand illusion. Behind the scenes, the foundation was already crumbling. Diana's fate had been sealed before she even walked down the aisle. But if Charles knew he didn't love Diana, why marry her at all? Sarah's confession exposes a side of the royal family few have dared to acknowledge. There was pressure from above. The Queen, ever watchful, ever aware of the monarchy's delicate balance, knew Charles couldn't remain entangled with a woman like Camilla. Not yet. A king needs a queen, a respectable one, and so Diana was chosen. Was she truly loved, or was she merely convenient? And then there were the letters. Private exchanges between Charles and Camilla, written in secrecy, are hidden from public view. Diana suspected them, but Sarah knew. Letters filled with longing, with promises, with regret. Charles's true emotions were never directed at Diana. They had always belonged to someone else. Did the Queen know? Did she encourage the marriage, knowing it was doomed? Or did she believe, like the world did, that love could be forced, that Diana's charm would be enough to change Charles's heart? But the most chilling revelation is not what Charles did, but what Sarah didn't do. She was there, watching it unfold, watching her sister struggle, watching as the weight of the crown began to crush her spirit. Could she have done more? Could she have stopped it? The regret lingers in her voice, the knowledge that she saw it unravel, yet stayed silent. Diana had been thrust into a role she never truly understood, trapped in a marriage that was never meant to last. And Sarah, she was powerless to save her. This is not just about Charles, this is about the hidden machinery of the monarchy, the quiet forces that shape the lives of those within it, the secrets they carry, and the choices they are forced to make. Sarah's words don't just expose one man, they expose an entire system. And now, after all these years, the world is finally listening. But Sarah's revelations don't just expose Charles, they reveal the hidden dynamics of the royal family that led to Diana's suffering. And if this is only the beginning, what other truths have yet to be uncovered? From the very beginning, Sarah had her doubts. She had seen the way Charles looked at Diana, not with admiration, not with the passion of a man eager to begin a lifelong journey with the woman he loved. Something was missing, a coldness, a reluctance, a quiet detachment that sent a chill through Sarah's spine. Diana, on the other hand, was hopeful, naive even. She believed in love, in the fairy tale that had been sold to her, in the idea that a princess could find happiness within the walls of Buckingham Palace. But Sarah saw what Diana refused to. This was not a love story. This was a transaction. Even before the wedding, the warning signs were there. Diana had confided in Sarah about Charles' indifference, the way he seemed distant, uninterested. She had brushed it off as nerves, as the weight of royal duty pressed down on his shoulders. But Sarah knew better. This was not a man preparing to marry the love of his life. This was a man fulfilling an obligation. Diana, blinded by youth and the intoxicating promise of becoming a princess, chose to ignore the discomfort gnawing at her soul. She convinced herself that things would change, that love would grow, and that once the vows were exchanged, everything would fall into place. But Sarah wasn't so sure, and soon her worst fears would be realized. The world watched as Diana walked down the aisle, radiant in her ivory gown, the picture of a perfect bride. But behind the cameras, behind the applause and the admiration, something was wrong. Charles's gaze never softened, and his hands never trembled with nervous excitement. And then, there were the words, the ones that would haunt Diana for years to come. "Whatever love means." A phrase so casually spoken, yet so devastatingly clear. When asked if he loved Diana, Charles hesitated, and when he finally answered, it was with a phrase so detached, so hollow, that even those watching from their televisions could feel the weight of what had just been said. Sarah heard it too, and in that moment, she knew. Diana would spend years trying to earn his affection, desperately seeking validation from a man who had already made up his mind. Sarah watched as her sister's spirit dimmed, as the bright, hopeful young woman she once knew slowly faded into someone consumed by self-doubt. Diana was trapped in a marriage where love was nothing more than a distant idea, something Charles was neither willing nor capable of giving, and yet she stayed, holding on to the hope that one day things would be different, that one day Charles would choose her. But Sarah knew the truth. Diana had never been Charles's choice. She had never been the one he wanted. The whispers had always been there, the shadow of another woman lingering just beneath the surface. And as Diana struggled to make sense of her husband's coldness, Sarah found herself asking the same question over and over again. If Charles never loved Diana, why did he marry her? The answer was one that Diana had feared all along, because Charles' heart had always belonged to someone else. Diana wasn't the first woman in Charles's life. She wasn't even the second. Camilla had been there all along. Before Diana, before the cameras, before the grand spectacle of a royal wedding, there was only one woman who truly held Charles's heart. And it wasn't the young, radiant princess the world adored. It was Camilla Parker Bowles. Their history stretched back years, woven into the fabric of his life, long before he ever laid eyes on Diana. Charles and Camilla had a love that defied royal expectations, but it came at a price that Diana would ultimately be forced to pay. Sarah had her suspicions. Long before the engagement, before the world celebrated what seemed to be a perfect match, whispers had reached her ears. Camilla wasn't just an old friend. She wasn't just a passing acquaintance. She was an unshakable presence in Charles's life, a constant shadow lingering just beyond the public's gaze. And yet, when Charles was set to marry, it wasn't Camilla who stood by his side, it was Diana. Why? Because love had never been part of the equation. The monarchy needed a bride who was young, beautiful, and untainted by scandal. Camilla was everything Diana hadn't experienced, married, and already stained by her past. The royal family would never allow it, and so, Charles had no choice. He was the heir to the throne, bound by duty, and duty demanded a wife who could be molded into the perfect queen. But even as Charles prepared to marry Diana, his heart remained elsewhere. There were letters, secret conversations, and stolen moments that spoke of a love he never let go of. Sarah would later learn the full extent of the betrayal, and how Charles had never truly ended things with Camilla, even as he prepared to start a new life with Diana. Did Sarah warn her sister? Did she try to shield her from the heartbreak that was coming? Or did she, like so many others, remain silent, trapped by the weight of royal expectation? The truth was that Charles never truly wanted to marry Diana. His reluctance was evident, his hesitations glaring, but the pressure was insurmountable. The royal family had given their approval, the public had fallen in love with the idea of a fairy tale, and Charles, ever the obedient son, did what was expected of him. He went through with it. And with that, Diana's fate was sealed. But while Diana wore a crown, Camilla remained his queen in the shadows. Their affair never truly ended. The love letters continued, exchanged behind closed doors, written with the kind of longing that Diana had never received. She was a wife in name only, a placeholder, a public symbol of a marriage that had never truly existed. And as the years passed, as the truth began to seep through the cracks, Diana's world began to unravel. Sarah saw it happening. She saw the pain in her sister's eyes, the loneliness, the slow realization that she had been deceived. But by the time Diana fully understood the depth of the betrayal, it was too late. She may have tolerated the affair for a while, but when she spoke out, the royal family made sure she paid the price. And once again, Sarah found herself watching from the sidelines, knowing that the worst was yet to come. Diana was never meant to be a silent princess. She was supposed to smile, wave, and accept her fate. But when she dared to speak, when she refused to play the role the royal family had assigned her, they made sure she would never be heard again. For years, Diana had been trapped in a marriage that was never built on love, forced to watch as the man she married cherished another woman in secret. She had been humiliated, ignored, and cast aside. But she wasn't broken. She still had one thing left in her voice, and when she finally used it, the consequences were devastating. The world watched in stunned silence as Diana sat across from journalist Martin Bashir in the now infamous BBC Panorama interview. She didn't hold back. She didn't sugarcoat the truth. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. It was the confession that shattered the illusion. The moment Diana ripped away the carefully crafted royal facade, she exposed Charles's affair with Camilla, her struggles with bulimia, the depression, the loneliness, and the suffocating life behind the palace walls. She made it clear she had never been accepted, and for the first time the world saw what she had endured, what she had fought against, what she had survived. But the royal family? They saw a threat. The backlash was immediate. The palace moved swiftly, coldly, efficiently. Diana had gone too far. She had broken the sacred, unspoken rule of the monarchy: never reveal what happens behind closed doors. From that moment on, Diana was no longer just a troublesome wife to a future king. She was a danger to the institution itself, and for that, she had to be silenced. Sarah saw it happen. The isolation, the way Diana's phone calls stopped being returned, the once open-way doors suddenly slammed shut. Once she had been the most adored woman in the world, a princess who captured hearts effortlessly, but after that interview she became an outsider. The palace launched a quiet but ruthless campaign against her: leaks to the press, whispers of instability, and stories designed to make her look weak, erratic, and unfit to stand on her own. They wanted to discredit her, to make the public doubt the very things she had confessed. And then they went further: the divorce. A carefully orchestrated legal battle designed to strip Diana of everything she had left. Charles had the palace behind him, the Queen's approval, the full weight of the monarchy protecting him. Diana? She had only herself. The negotiations were brutal. She lost her title, her royal status, her official place in the family she had married into. She was left standing alone, a princess in name only. Sarah knew how much it hurt Diana. She saw the toll it took, the quiet devastation that followed. But what could she do? Could she have fought harder, spoken louder, defended her sister when it mattered most? Or was she just another voice that had been silenced? Diana may have been free from Charles, but she was never free from the royal family's control, and the battle for her survival was far from over. Decades have passed, but some wounds never heal. For Charles, the ghost of Diana never truly left. In life, she was the woman who defied him, the wife who refused to be silent. In death, she became something even more powerful: a legend, an icon, a tragic figure whose memory could never be erased. And now, whispers from inside the palace suggest that behind closed doors, in the rare moments when the cameras aren't watching, Charles carries a burden he can never put down. After Diana's death, something changed. Charles had always been a man of control, of calculated composure, but the days that followed were unlike anything he had ever prepared for. The world's grief was overwhelming. The flowers, the candlelit vigils, the raw devastation of millions mourning a woman the royal family had tried to cast aside. And at the center of it all stood Charles, no longer just the future king, but the man many now blamed for Diana's suffering. The press vilified him, the public despised him, and inside the palace, there was only silence. But what haunted him most weren't the headlines. It was the letters. Letters that remained hidden from the public eye, written in the privacy of his torment, letters that for the first time revealed the depth of his regret. What did they say? Was it an apology, a confession, a desperate attempt to explain what could never be justified? Some claim they were never meant to be seen, that they were destroyed before they could reach anyone's hands. But those who did catch glimpses whispered the same chilling truth: Charles was haunted, and no amount of royal power could change what had already been done. And then there were his sons. William and Harry were the only 2 people who could never be fooled by royal protocol, the only 2 who had suffered just as much as Diana herself. Charles had lost their trust long before Diana's death, but after that tragic night in Paris, the fracture became irreparable. The funeral was a spectacle, watched by millions, but behind the grandeur was a father struggling to connect with his children. How do you comfort the sons of a woman whose death is forever linked to your failures? How do you undo the past when the world refuses to forget? Sarah had her thoughts. Did Charles ever truly love Diana? She had always believed that love, at least the kind Diana had craved, was something Charles was incapable of giving. But regret? That, Sarah was certain, he carried every day. It was in his posture, his hesitations, the way he avoided speaking her name in public, not because he wanted to forget, but because he knew he never could. But despite his regrets, history cannot be rewritten. Diana's fate was already sealed, and no amount of remorse could ever bring her back. For years, the royal family has insisted that Queen Elizabeth remained neutral in Charles and Diana's marriage, that she was above the drama, above the personal conflicts, above the choices that led to Diana's suffering. But was that the truth? Behind the formality, behind the carefully crafted image of a monarch who ruled with wisdom and restraint, was there something more? Did the Queen quietly take Charles' side? And if so, was Diana ever really fighting against just one man? Or was she battling an entire institution? Sarah had her suspicions. She had seen how the palace operated, how decisions weren't always as impartial as they were made to seem. The Queen was the head of the monarchy, but she was also a mother who had spent years preparing her son for the throne, molding him into the future King of England. And when Diana stepped into the picture, things became complicated. Sarah knew the royal family valued order, stability, and tradition. Diana? She was unpredictable, she was emotional, outspoken, and unwilling to quietly fade into the background like so many royal wives before her. Did the Queen see this as a threat? Then came the meetings, the private conversations between Charles and his mother, the ones no one was ever meant to hear. What was said behind those closed doors? Did the Queen push Charles to endure his marriage, or did she urge him to prepare for the inevitable? Some claim she advised patience, hoping that over time Diana would learn to play the role expected of her. Others, however, believe something far more calculated happened. The Queen saw what Charles saw, that Diana could not be controlled, and in the end, a princess who refused to obey was far more dangerous than an unhappy marriage. But the final blow came in the form of a letter, a single letter from the Queen to Diana, just months before the divorce. To the public, it seemed like a simple request, a formal declaration that the marriage had reached its end, that divorce was the best solution. But those who knew Diana, who understood her heart, saw it as something else entirely, a command, a warning. A final decision was made without her consent. She had fought for years to carve out her own space within the royal family, to be heard, to be valued. But with one letter, everything was over. Did Sarah ever confront the Queen? Did she ever ask why, in the end, Diana was left to fight her battles alone? Or was the answer already clear? Diana had never been one of them. She had always been an outsider, and no one, not even the Queen, was going to save her. But Diana wasn't just a victim of her husband's coldness, she was also trapped in the royal family's system, one she could never escape. And as history would soon prove, her battle was far from over. Diana once claimed she was being watched. She feared for her life. And she wasn't wrong. For years, she had confided in close friends, warning them that something felt off, that phone calls would click and cut out, that cars followed her late at night, that the walls of the palace had ears. At first, people dismissed her concerns as paranoia, another symptom of a woman struggling under the weight of royal expectations. But Diana was never paranoid. She was right. The months leading up to her death were filled with unease. Her relationship with the royal family had deteriorated beyond repair. She had defied them, humiliated them, and made them the villains in the eyes of the public. The BBC interview had been the final blow, but it wasn't just her words that made her a threat. It was her independence. Diana had broken free from the control of the monarchy. She was no longer just a former royal, she was a global icon. She had influence, power, and a platform that reached far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. And that, more than anything, made her dangerous. Then came the letter. A chilling handwritten note from Diana herself was discovered after her death. It was dated October 1995, almost 2 years before the fatal crash. In it, she wrote words that sent shivers through those who read them. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car brake failure and serious head injury to make the path clear for him to marry. Diana predicted her death, and then, just as she had feared, it happened. Paris. The Pont de l'Alma tunnel, a high-speed chase, a crash that sent shockwaves through the world. The official story was simply a tragic accident caused by a drunk driver attempting to outrun the paparazzi. But to those who knew Diana, who had heard her warnings, the explanation never felt right. Sarah heard the theories. The whispers spread like wildfire. Was it just an accident, or was it something more? She had seen the grief, the rage, the disbelief in the days that followed. Too many questions remained unanswered. Why were the cameras in the tunnel conveniently turned off that night? Why was Diana not given immediate medical attention at the scene? Why were certain witnesses never called to testify? And most chilling of all, why does the royal family still refuse to acknowledge Diana's fears? Sarah never spoke publicly about what she believed. Did she accept the official version of events? Or did she, like so many others, suspect that Diana's death wasn't just a tragedy, but a message? But the biggest question remains, does Sarah know more than she's telling? And if she does, will she ever reveal the truth? After years of silence, Sarah has finally spoken, and this time, she isn't holding back. For decades, she watched as history was rewritten, as the truth was buried beneath royal protocol, as Diana's voice was lost beneath the weight of monarchy. But now, Sarah's words may just change everything we thought we knew. Her recent interviews have been subtle and careful, but between the lines, the message is clear. Diana's suffering was not just personal, it was institutional. And Charles? He was never the victim. Sarah admitted what many had long suspected. Diana's marriage was doomed from the start. That Charles had been emotionally distant, that the affair with Camilla had never truly ended, and that Diana had fought against a system that was designed to break her. But the real confession? The moment that sent shockwaves through royal watchers? Sarah confirmed that Charles had more control over Diana's fate than the world was ever led to believe. But if Diana lost her battle, her legacy remains untouchable. William and Harry, her greatest triumphs, are proof of that. Two brothers, shaped by grief, forever carrying the weight of their mother's story. One walking in step with the monarchy, the other walking away from it. Sarah's words remind the world that Diana's influence didn't end the day she was laid to rest. It lives on in the choices her sons make every day. The next generation of royals cannot escape her shadow, and neither can Charles. Public opinion has shifted, and no amount of time will erase the damage that was done. Even now, as king, his reputation carries the scars of his past. Camilla, the woman who once lived in the shadows, now sits beside him as queen, but to the world, she will always be the third person in Diana's marriage. The ghost of the past lingers, a reminder that Diana was wronged, in ways that no crown, no title, and no carefully crafted public relations strategy can ever undo. Through it all, Sarah remains dedicated to keeping Diana's memory alive. She doesn't seek the spotlight, she doesn't speak often, but when she does, the world listens. She ensures that Diana's name is never forgotten, that the charities she championed still thrive, and that the causes she fought for still have a voice. Sarah may have stayed silent for years, but in the end, she is one of the last guardians of Diana's truth. And yet, there's still one question that lingers, one final mystery that remains unsolved. Are there more secrets left to be uncovered? Does Sarah know something the world still doesn't? If she does, will she ever tell? Diana may be gone, but the battle for her truth is far from over. The story doesn't end here. There's still so much left to uncover, so many unanswered questions, so many hidden truths waiting to come to light. If you want to keep exploring the most shocking, untold stories of the past and present, subscribe to Golden Age Fandom. We bring you the secrets, the scandals, and the stories that history tried to erase. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the truth, one story at a time.